Okay, in this video tutorial, we're going to talk about now selecting images to bring into Camera Raw or just previewing images to see quality of the content and that sort of information. So the first thing that I will look at, depending on how I photographed or where these images are coming from, cell phone, camera, whatever it may be, I will preview the metadata first. So that's why I put this tab to be primary in the top left. Because if I were looking for a specific level of content for maybe print-based, I want to make sure that my ISO and my exposure settings and my pixel dimension was correct before I even chose a quality of an image. Because if I was just looking at the graphic over here, I may go, oh, that looks great, and then find out that the pixel dimension is really small, or ISO setting is way too high for print-based, or I know I'm going to have to do a lot of processing on it when I have an alternate image. So I will quickly glance at exposure settings, pixel dimension, time and date, whatever it may be that I'm looking for. But also, when you're ever using images that aren't your own, if you're working with somebody else or you're using images, I check the content information about the provider of the image. So I'm going to move this down so we can see it a little bit longer, and then check out if there's any copyright notices. So here you can see that I have my copyright notice. My copyright status isn't updated, so that's what I mentioned in the previous tutorial. If you want that to show a physical copyright symbol on the Photoshop files or image file titles in their title bar, if you choose this drop-down menu and do copyrighted, it will put the copyright symbol in that bar. So even when someone's looking at your photo in like preview or one of the previews in Windows, it will have a copyright symbol there, so the viewer will know for sure that that image is copyrighted. So you can change that over if you'd like. And if this is my own image and I wanted to add extra metadata, which you can do through Photoshop as well, but this is easier, you can add any bits of metadata you want where the pencil is visible. So you just click on the text field and it allows you to add or adjust or modify that information. So as you go through this file, you can see there's tons of information. So you have audio file information, you have video file information, and DICOM is a file for medical files. So for MRI imaging, they have specific layered file types. So that's what DICOM is all about. So even medical stuff, audio, video, all of that. So tons of stuff there. Now the cool thing about it though, the reason why I didn't do my copyright status yet is let's scroll down there and check it out. I can simply take my copyright status and go and change it and do copyright. So now once I've done that, I check the commit box. Now it commits it to that image. So that image will constantly have that copyright symbol go around with its file name when it's open in a different type of browser. But I have all these images that I didn't do it. So for selecting images in the content bar, if you didn't want to copyright, or if some of these images weren't yours, you can hold down the command key and select non-contiguous files. So I can select these 3 files, and then I can update the copyright status and do copyright, and then commit to that, and that will work. Or I can do a range of files. So if I select a file, hold down the shift key, and then select an end file, it selects the range in between. And then I can update that copyright status and do copyright, and then commit to that. Or I can just select all of them. If I do Command A, and then grab all of my files in the content bar, then I can change that value, choose copyright. Actually, I don't think it's going to work well because I already have some copyrighted, and then I can commit to that. So there's a lot of ways to select multiple files here and update the metadata, and once you commit, that activates all the files in the content bar. So that is a lot easier than doing it manually in Photoshop, because in Photoshop you can only do one tab at a time. Okay, so that's selecting your files in the content bar and modifying the metadata. So that will help you choose files based on what they're worth, based on their settings and what you're looking for. So next, you have the standard preview. So in the view menu, like I said, you have your preview modes. So we're just doing full screen preview, and notice it's the space bar. So if I have a file selected, I hit the space bar, and now I can just cycle through my content bar. Now the positive side of this viewer is I get a quick preview that fits it to screen. But beware, this fit to screen is not 100%. This fit to screen is based on the image's pixel dimension and your screen pixel dimension. It's fitting it based on its size. So if you had a small thumbnail, the small thumbnail would only be maybe this big in your preview. It wouldn't stretch it to fit. But since these graphics are actually bigger than the screen, it's just snapping it to the edge so that it's proportionally equivalent, but I can go through the whole content bar and it cycles, it loops through. So even when it reaches the end, I just start back at the beginning. But if I wanted to see any of these images at full size, I can click once and it goes automatically to 100%. So then I can cycle through at 100%. So if I was looking for detail, if I was looking for pixel degradation, chromatic aberration, or anything like that, I can cycle through these images really quickly at 100%. Then I can click again, and when I click again, it goes back to the regular zoom function. So it will either go smaller or fit to screen. Now, the reason why the click function is used is if you were looking for a specific area. So let's say I wanted to see if my shoes were in focus. I would click on the shoe and it zooms to that area. And then I click again and it zooms out, or I could choose the color card and click there. So wherever I click, it centers the zoom. Then also, I can use my plus and minus keys. If I use my plus and minus keys, I can go all the way up to 800 and then back down to 100, okay? Or back down to its regular zoom function. I can't go beyond that though. I only can go to the level of the screen or based on the dimensions of the image. And then when you're done, you can hit the spacebar, and that's it. But in the preview function, it doesn't allow you to select images as you go. It is just what it is. It's a preview function. But then up at the view menu, you have your review mode, or Command B. When you go into review mode, this gives you some functions down here on the left and right. And it gives you a carousel function so you can see the images that are coming and ones that are still in the queue. Because what you're doing here is you're going through the images that are selected in the content bar, and you are going to create a controlled selection of what photos you want to bring into RAW. So I can cycle through the carousel without kicking any out, or I can hit the down arrow and notice this is an underexposed image. I have one that is exposed properly. I don't need it. So I'm going to kick it out of the mix. Once I kick it out of the mix, it's no longer part of the selection, which is great because now I did a selection and I did it. But let's say this photo I like, it's properly exposed, but I want to see if it's in focus. I can click on my loop button here. So then it opens the loop, and then I can move the loop around to see the focus and make sure it's a sharp focus. And to me, it looks okay, so I'm going to keep that image and move along. But this one's overexposed, so I deselect that. That one's poor white balance, deselect that, poor white balance, and let's say the rest of these are good. So now you can see, I can see all the ones that I've selected. So that's why it gives you the carousel. Now once I have this selected, I can create a new collection out of them. So if I click this button, it allows me to create a collection out of these specific photos because I know they're good. And then when I'm all said and done, I can X out of this window. When I X out of this window, all the ones I booted out are deselected. I have my collection if I saved it, saved, and now I can move into Adobe Bridge. So that's another way to select files. Now, let's say I'm gonna cancel out of this, so I'm gonna just click one image below so I can show this other function specifically. But when we get to a certain part, I'm going to remind you, after you use that review mode, how the star system is really great. So remember, I told you can control to see images based on their star ratings, so 5 and below, 4 and below, 3 and below. But then, once I make that review selection, I can hit one of those star key commands. So once I got that selection that I did right, so I had like irregular images selected based on their exposure values and based on their focus. So once I have multiple images selected, I can just do Command 5. And once I do Command 5, it gives all 6 of those images a 5-star rating. So then when I deselect off images and I want to just see my 5 stars, I click on the Show 5 Stars. And now it removes all of those from the review and just shows me my 5 stars. Then I can do Command A, and now we're ready to open it into Adobe Bridge. And then you would use that function so that if you close down Bridge or you're in the middle of work session and something came up and you had to leave, you don't have to worry about backing out of that review stage, because once you back out, you can just do the ratings that you want to give it, and then you're all set. So that's that. And then if you didn't want to rate those number 5, you can just do Command 0. They're all going to disappear. Then you go back up to your filter setting and then do Clear Filter. And then it will show you all of the photos regardless of the rating. Okay? Now, lastly, let's say I have images I don't want, or images I'm not going to work on, or whatever. So there's a few images in here that I don't want because of their exposure value. I saved some images that may be too bright or too dark or have weird settings on them. So if you didn't want an image, say this is an overexposed image, I can right click on it and let's see where it is. I always do the key command, but there's Move to Trash, and that is physically your trash can on your OS. So that will send it right to your trash can in your Mac OS dock or your trash can on a PC desktop. So when you do Move to Trash, be careful of that. You could also do Command Delete, and delete is not on the keypad, it's on the short keyboard. So if you do Command key, that automatically sends it to the trash. And let's see, anything else here once we select? I think that's it. So for selecting graphics, we select our range, and then once we make our selections, we can move into Adobe Camera Raw. So that is the few methods you can select graphics in Adobe Bridge.